We schedule meetings, calls, hangouts, even our social media interactions. We schedule everything these days. But the conversations that stay with us the most are often never by appointment. I met someone on a flight back from Texas at 35,000 feet who thought his life dream was already over at the age of 16. We used to expect conversations everywhere: trains, diners, waiting rooms, grocery store lines, our church foyers. But now silence feels polite, and the interaction, it feels almost invasive, rude. When did strangers become interruptions instead of possibilities? Now, this is not just nostalgia for you extroverts out there. No, but this is about focusing on the disappearance, the atrophy of a social muscle, and what we might lose when that randomness disappears. I didn't realize how rare it had become until a teenage bull rider reminded me. Okay, let me tell you a story. This flight was just a routine home trip for me and return. So I was on my return flight back, and um, standard sitting in coach. Before the flight, my seat had been reassigned. I don't know. It's not like I was in some great seat or bad seat before. They just moved me. And all of a sudden, I got put into the aisle with someone else near me. Pretty common on these flights. So the flight comes and we board, and I sit down, and it's only another couple of minutes before the person who is sitting next to me comes up to the aisle, stands there, and I realize, okay, I've got a travel buddy. I stand up. It's a young guy, uh, cowboy hat, and I thought, man, where's he headed? That he just he looks like a local to me. And so he sits down. He's holding his hats because, of course, you don't want to put a cowboy hat up in the compartment because it'll get all bent up. So I appreciated that he was doing that. He wasn't taking up a bunch of space, and he sat down. And the first thing he did was thank me, sir. Thank you for uh, letting me sit in the window seat. And I'm thinking, I there are assigned seats, but yeah, sure, no problem. That doesn't bother me. Um, and realizing too, he's talking to me as an old man or as an elder, uh, which already I thought was funny. But I figured he was young, but I didn't know how young. It was then that he informed me that this is his first big flight on a plane. So he was a little nervous. And I thought, well, this plane isn't that big, This is just a 2 hour jump. This is not that long, but okay, that's pretty cool. And so, well, good, watch the flight, stare out the window, enjoy it. But yeah, so he apologized first off the bat there. He said, sorry, I'm a little nervous and not sure what to do because this is my first big flight, and which immediately made me curious. Um, and, and so I thought, okay, well, we're here. Let's let's have this conversation. So how do you are you leaving Texas for the first time? Are you how'd you end up on this flight? And he said, well, I'm going heading back home. Okay, you're heading home. I guess you didn't fly to Texas in the first place. And he said, no, we driven with somebody, and so yeah, I'd been here about 6 months, and now I'm heading back because things didn't work out. Really, really, okay. Well, like what were you trying to do? You seem seem pretty young. You headed there for school? Were you headed there for work? What were you doing? So, well, I was coming down to try to get into professional bull riding, and I was looking to get onto a ranch to start doing this, so that I could, so I could start working and then I could start riding. Okay, this is great, but you're gonna have to tell me all about this. What do you mean you were gonna get into professional bull riding? I'm from Texas. I'm no stranger to rodeos. I know about bull riding to a degree, but just as a spectator, how do you break into it? Um, and and so the conversation began, and finding out that he was 16 years old and was had left home, come to Texas to become a professional bull rider. And that was, I think it was 6 months. I'm saying that roughly. And there was a number of things in this conversation that I didn't even try to jump into yet. Right? How does that work? Were you not in school? Um, what did you kind of come down thinking that you were going to work on? And uh, he couldn't get onto a place because he was only 16, and you need to be 18, which I suppose somebody could have told him before, but he was such a nice guy that I thought this isn't hard-headedness. This isn't obstinate or he didn't get what he wanted. This is somebody that just had a dream in his mind. And he had some family that had done bull riding. And even though his family didn't come, I mean, he didn't grow up on a ranch, he didn't grow up around all these animals, he didn't even grow up doing rodeo. But um, but he was fascinated by that crazy, chaotic 8 seconds on the back of a bull. Um, and when this trip didn't pan out, he said he was just going to have to head home and probably start working or head to school. And, just it was worth a shot. It was something he'd hoped to do. He believed he failed. So I had to remind him it's okay. One, you are only 16. And I know that that can sound dismissive to a 16-year-old. We all remember that, right? That you figured that out. You're ready to tackle the world. You're going to do something. And if it doesn't work out, well, you may be dead by 20. So you have to make it happen now. So I tried to keep that in mind as we were talking, but still I reminded him, you're just 16. That doesn't mean that you were limited because of being 16, but rather you've got so much time left to do it again. You've already done something that most adults never attempt. And I don't mean bull riding. Nobody needs to attempt bull riding. That's terrifying. No, rather the idea of just packing up, venturing out, and trying to do something that you've always wanted to do passionately. And then I reminded him effectively that his experience isn't negated or erased by the outcome of this one trip. And the experience itself is part of this journey and part of the outcome itself. Now, remember, this conversation should not have happened at all. And because it shouldn't have happened, it matters. It certainly mattered to me. Any number of things could have prevented this. If he'd been a regular teenager, worn headphones, if my seat had not been reassigned randomly by the airline, if we had simply followed followed modern etiquette and stayed quiet and nodded at each other and stuck with pleasantries, well, this very human moment would never have existed. So let's step away from this story. As fun it is to talk about, and I've been telling this story now for the last couple of weeks to people because it was just so much fun. And it reminded me of how long it's been and how rare it is that you just get to randomly talk to strangers. Um, but in general, this this is what happens. We've engineered these this like frictionless solitude, alone time. Phones have eliminated idle time, right? There's no such thing as being bored because you're always doing something. Headphones, earbuds, they create these portable walls around everybody, their own little biospheres. And the social norms now protect personal bubbles. Not only is that personal space um, something that is has become assumed as a right, but it is reinforced and shielded and impenetrable, and it's not even transparent anymore. People disappear inside these personal bubbles of technology and privacy. We optimize comfort, and in doing so, we've maybe accidentally removed discovery of each other. Strangers function as maybe reality editors, reinforcers. They they expose for us different ages, different generations, different ideas and beliefs, uh, different paths that people walk in life, different pursuits and hopes and dreams. Without that, without the randomness of stranger interaction, our worldview is curated by nothing but algorithms instead of these wonderful accidents. We have replaced unpredictability of people with this predictability of content. So why do we avoid it? Well, some of it, I think, and I worked on a bit of a list here, is I think there's a fear of awkwardness, right? Awkwardness now feels like failure, social failure, completely outright, instead of the beginning of social interaction. Every conversation should start a little awkward. Every conversation, every greeting, meeting, it's supposed to be a little odd as you gauge the room, as you start identifying what you have in common, who these people are, where you are in life, and then eventually what stories you can share. And that leads to another item, which is identity protection, right? Talking to strangers risks disagreement without preparation. Certainly, this 16-year-old kid I talked to, um, he was just so excited that I was infectious, contagious. I had to be excited with him and for him, and a little disappointed with him. But what if I had had an extreme um, displeasure or disapproval of rodeo and professional bull riding? I suppose then that he might not have been prepared for it. Maybe I wouldn't have been prepared for disagreeing with somebody. And and so in lieu of that, we've moved to this culture of efficiency. We've monetized our time to such a degree that every conversation becomes an expense that we have to consider and that we often decide that we can't afford. But psychologically, unplanned conversations actually do a lot for us. And I looked up these things because I knew there was something changing because it had been so long since I'd have a conversation. I felt it internally, and I hope he did too. When I realized I was just having a nice long conversation with a complete stranger. So I looked this up. Unplanned conversations train empathy. They calibrate your uh, your ability to empathize with others. They expand your conversational flexibility, which is a big word for the ability to have different types of conversations with different people and do so comfortably. Um, it trains your ability to read the tone and the nuance in other people's voices and responses and conversations. And it trains our patience with imperfection. I'm not an excellent storyteller, and I probably could have done a much better job of telling the plain story. I haven't had the chance to tell it 100 times over many years, but and he didn't either. And so when I listened to him, I thought you're leaving out so many details, but that's okay because this imperfection in his storytelling was just excitement and discomfort, the combination of being new to air travel and being disappointed with this current adventure that he had just had. Uh, and and so without all of those things, people just become categories to process and to reference. They're not individuals because you don't interact with them. But let's zoom back into the story. After we'd talked and we were almost landing, by this point, I'd heard a bit about his family. I knew he was young. He'd told me all about his adventure in Texas, and I had asked a bunch of questions. I'd told him a bit about me, and we'd exchanged some things. Yes, I gave him a little encouragement, but he didn't need advice, and he didn't need expertise. He certainly wasn't getting it from me. He just needed a witness, a human witness, another person that uh, could see that he had been on this journey. We underestimate how many people are walking around with these untold and unspoken chapters, just waiting for a listener that they may never see again. Some of these conversations exist precisely because they have no future step. There's no reputation to protect, no relationship to maintain, and there's no performance required. This is just rare honesty. We didn't just lose small talk as a society. We are losing the neutral territory between stranger and friend. Now people just jump from stranger to online acquaintance to like ideological opponent or ally. But there used to be a middle ground, temporary companions, compatriots on airplanes, in lines, at waiting rooms, um, in a diner or a coffee shop, a grocery store lane. And those things still happen, but so much more seldomly. These are places where humanity rehearsed itself. Now, I will never know if this kid succeeds. For the life of me, and guys, you understand this, the girls will be shaking their heads. We introduced ourselves, but I didn't get his full name. I wasn't thinking about his name. I was thinking about this wild story. And at this point, that is the point. I'll never know. I'm not part of his life. I was part of a moment in it. And moments shape people as much as relationships do. A society that stops talking to strangers slowly forgets how to talk to anyone who isn't exactly like them. Now, of course, I would like to tie this all in to the previous conversations we've had. And I want you to think about how many stories, experiences, adventures, and moments that you have had. And to take the opportunity to sit down and record them. Again, just tell the stories to someone. And when you think no one wants to listen, remember this event right here that I had, and this moment I had when a 16-year-old who thought that he had already peaked in life and didn't have an entire lifetime in the world in front of him. An absolute stranger was completely taken by his wonderful demeanor and personality and wanted to hear his story. The next time you have the chance, talk to strangers. Tell them your story. Listen to theirs. And when you're ready, turn on a camera and tell your story so that it's there and ready for posterity, and that you've given these stories and your life a forwarding address.